I don't really like to do it, but I feel I have to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, who, of course, died last week, supposedly, reportedly, of suicide in a Manhattan prison. Now, we'll be discussing that in greater length with journalist Whitney Webb on this show. But I wrote a piece about Epstein because I felt it was for counterpunch.org, because I felt it was important to think about what Jeffrey Epstein kind of represented and reflected and continues to reflect in our society. And I guess, well, where I started with the piece was talking about the weird fact that Jeffrey Epstein had a collection of eyeballs on his wall. This is according to a profile of him back in 2003 in Vanity Fair. He had all these eyeballs in the hallway when you walked in his home, apparently, and they were made for injured soldiers, so presumably they were prosthetic eyeballs, and each was individually framed and mounted in the entranceway there to Jeffrey Epstein's home, which is pretty weird and creepy. We're not told, by the way, in the article whether soldiers used them or whether they were just bought on the private market. Presumably they were, but in a weird and creepy way, the eyeballs made sense because Jeffrey Epstein was a watcher. He was a watcher of young women. I won't go into the details, but clearly some of his sexual practices when he molested these young women, these girls, these children, involved watching. And that's a particular warp in whatever depravity of his. And he also particularly seemed to target for his watching and for his sexual abuse a certain visual type: blonde, thin, white, seemingly wealthy. And there's something so, it's all about defilement. It's all about watching as corruption. And we also, as we will talk about later on in the program, we also have some evidence that he may have been spying on people, that he was watching for those kinds of depraved reasons as well. But we'll look into that. There's still many unanswered questions about that. But in that sense, first of all, he also liked to be seen. He made himself very visible. He pretended to be a billionaire, or gave all the outward trappings of being more wealthy than he apparently was. He liked to hobnob with the wealthy. He liked to hobnob with the extremely intelligent. He liked to pose and present himself as an intelligent guy and a bold thinker. So this was a guy who corrupted a lot of people in a lot of different ways, having to do with seeing, being seen, and so on. And that fits in with a very 21st century way. Look, I mean, there have been guys like Jeffrey Epstein throughout all human history, but there's something very 20th century about the way it expressed himself, particularly when you think about the fact that we live in a culture of watching. We have an economy of watching. We have an entire digital ecosystem and social media ecosystem based on the fact that they're watching us, they're collecting data about us, and they're then selling it, which may, in fact, have been exactly what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. Now, we don't know if he was murdered or whether he committed suicide, but we do know now, reportedly, that the guards who were supposed to be overseeing him and supervising him were away from their posts when his death occurred, which leads to what might be the ultimate irony in Jeffrey Epstein's life, that this person who survived by watching others died because nobody was watching.